So let's start with a baseball story. It's the bottom of the ninth inning. The home team is down by 1 run. There's a player on third hoping to come home to score the tying run, another player on second hoping to come home and score the winning run. So the crack of the bat, the ball hits sharply past the second baseman. The runners drive for home. Safe, says the umpire once. Safe, says the umpire a second time. The home team wins, the game's over, and victory is celebrated, and everyone goes home to play another day. Coming home safe. It's so easy for us to take that for granted. It's so easy to think of coming home safe as something that'll happen every day without any intentional planning and without management. Coming home safe, it's just too easy to forget for that one tragic split second, not even enough time to think about it, that one tragic split second that changes lives or ends lives forever. In baseball, coming home safe is all about good management, practice, skill, training, and again, good management. Winning baseball clubs never leave winning to chance or luck. And the same discipline should be true of every one of our agricultural organizations. Every single farm, from the tiniest part-time farm that grows just enough produce to stick out in a roadside stand in front of the house, to the biggest multi-state, multinational industry that produces food for the world, whether it's food or feed or fiber crops, needs to take safety seriously every day. Carl Casale set us off on the right stage yesterday when he talked about safety, because safety is not a project, it's not a program, it's not something you do once a year and put on the shelf. It has to be part of the absolute DNA of everything you do in your farm or other agricultural business. If it's not part of your DNA, it'll get set aside, and that one tragic split second will be the time when you thought, gosh, I should have done that. Statistically, farming is indeed one of the most dangerous occupations in the country. It's in death rates and fatality rates, I think, still fourth behind fishing, logging, and aviation. In injury and maimings and life-changing injuries for people, I think it's 3 maybe, or 4. It's pretty high. It's too high. As a result of this, we see a lot about farming accidents in the newspaper, particularly when youngsters are involved. We see it on Capitol Hill. We see people talk to their congressmen, their state legislators, and so as a result, regulatory officials and legislatures continuously talk and work towards driving more and more and more regulation. We're already very regulated. It hasn't worked as well as it should because it's not just about obeying laws. It's about doing the right things and protecting ourselves, our families, our workers, future of agriculture, and our businesses. We know now that the Department of Labor would like to extend OSHA into production side of farming as well. We know that every few years are talks by the Departments of Transportation at the federal and state level about changing the agricultural exemptions for transport, for driving, for operating trucks and other equipment. And it's really difficult when we're confronted with all these statistics of being dangerous, lots of lives lost, lots of life-changing injuries, as a professional having to stand in front of agencies and Congress and the news media and defend this. It is very difficult to adequately explain the uniqueness of agriculture in a 30-second soundbite to explain why we should be regulated differently than the, quote, mining and factories. It becomes very difficult. So when you're asked why somebody under 18 can't work in a mine or a factory, but they can work on a farm without training, without real supervision, different than anybody else, it's just very difficult for professionals like me and like many of you to defend that. We can't afford that. The public can't afford it, and agriculture can't afford for public opinion to roll against us. Farm and agricultural incidents continue to kill and maim our friends at what we have to just call an alarming rate every year because we allow it. Yes, we allow it, whether we're farm owners or agriculture professionals or the workers on the farms, we allow it. And is anybody here, and I see what everybody's saying about the lights, so I can't see your hands probably, But I doubt if anybody here who's been involved in agriculture most of their lives could not name a family member or a friend, relative, or some neighbor, at least somebody they knew, who hasn't been killed or had their life changed forever by a farm accident. Usually one that shouldn't, well, not usually, almost always one that shouldn't have been allowed to happen. The personal costs of family tragedies are terrible enough. In addition to the personal cost, every time someone allows him or herself or someone else to be involved in another agricultural accident, there are huge looming costs and losses to the entire agricultural community. Whether we personally know the victims or not, every time some young person is killed or maimed, we lose part of the future of agriculture. Every time a farmer or family member, visitor, or employee is involved in an accident on a farm, agriculture loses important people, time, produce, money, and reputation. And even in those accidents where there aren't any labor law violations, you don't get written up or fined, there's potential for yet another farm-killing lawsuit. They happen every year, and family farms are lost every single year because the owner is not there or unable to carry on farming because of an injury, or the family is too stretched and can't do it, or because as a result of an accident, there's a lawsuit and the lawyers end up owning the farm. Let me tell you about a story right now that's wending its way through the courts. There was a 7-year-old last year, a nephew on the farm, a 7-year-old driving a tractor with his 3-year-old brother riding on the fender. The 3-year-old slipped, went under the wheel. Attempting to rescue the 3-year-old who was trapped under the tractor, a teenage worker broke his arm, and I don't remember all the details, I think his back, trying to rescue. So there's a death and an injury and a 7-year-old whose life's changed forever. There were no charges by the local sheriff. Gee, good news. It's apparent to me and everybody else who's looked at that the Wage and Hour Department of the U.S. Department of Labor hasn't looked into this yet, because if they had, there'd be wage and hour violations with a 7-year-old who is not the child of the farm owner operating equipment and a death being involved. But now there's a civil suit by the parents of the 3-year-old. My prediction is that family farm will be lost. It'll be lost to the attorney fees of defending it and possibly an award, if there's any money left for an award after the attorney fees. Ask any attorney, even if it wasn't illegal for that 7-year-old to drive the tractor with the 3-year-old riding, it's not something any attorney would relish trying to defend in court. It's not defensible. It's the kind of accident that we allow in agriculture that we cannot defend to the public or to the regulatory and legislative agencies. And when we allow these kinds of accidents to happen, we invite more and more regulation. And regulation doesn't do the job, because it's not only about obeying the law. Safety is not just about obeying the law. Safety, a culture of safety, is about doing the right things every time because you know they're the right things, and you do them because you want to. You want to be safe, you want to do things right, and you do it not because it's the law, but because it's right. It's terribly unfortunate that too many farming accidents aren't really farming accidents at all, but we can complain about that all we want. There are play accidents, recreational accidents. It's really difficult for us as professionals to accept that the kids out riding the ATV in the pasture field get written up as a farming accident because it happened on a farm. The kids riding the pony or the horse that get knocked off along the barbed wire fence, they weren't really doing farm work, but it often gets written up as a farming accident because it happened on the farm. Thinking of not to beat up ATVs or horses, but play things get written up and we get blamed for them. But thinking, and not to single out horses, I was a horse person as a kid myself, but statistically, I just read a statistic that if you spend your life around horses, 1 in 5 people that spend their life around horses end up suffering a life-threatening or life-changing accident. That's an awful statistic. I didn't know that, but it's a reality in our time. So we can complain all we want. When we talk about this at my annual meetings, they say it's the hobby farmers, it's the weekend people that just have a few acres, it's the kids out playing on the farm. We're saddled with it. We own it, and we have to be the ones to continue to work on that. There's an old saying that statistics don't lie, but that liars use statistics. And one of the things that I learned through ASHCA recently is that there's almost a 50% reduction in deaths among youths in farms in the last statistical numbers that came out. But interestingly, the numbers would indicate, if you just looked at the statistics, that it's safer for youth to work on the farm than to play on the farm, because if you start looking at where things happen. So it's important to supervise everybody who's on the farm, whether they're workers, visitors, guests, the children. They still have to work and play safely. Every ag-related accident we read about pushes us all closer to more regulation and more regulatory burden that nobody wants. These costs are only added to the terrible burden and expense that everyone who's had such an accident on their farm bears. There's an old saying, safety is no accident, and that's true. Nearly every accident that occurs at work is preventable, would have been preventable had the proper measures been put in place. Everyone has a responsibility to take the necessary precautions to protect themselves and everybody else in the workplace. You need to do it for yourself, for your family, for your friends, for the future of agriculture. In addition to the personal and family considerations as employers, you have both moral and legal responsibilities to provide a safe workplace and to provide proper training and the proper tools to provide the necessary safety equipment and programs to require everybody to participate. One of the hardest things that I'll bet Leon faced with his business was the fact that you might have even a manager who's been with you for a while, and when you implement safety as part of your daily culture and part of your daily life, not only you as the owner have to embody that and internalize it and live it every day, all of your managers do, and everybody who works for you. And if it comes down to one of your managers or even your best worker, if they won't take safety seriously, you have to have the courage to send them somewhere else. Let them go work somewhere else. Everybody has to internalize it. You have to demand that as a manager for yourself and for everybody. I suspect that Leon had some, we really like this guy, he's been with us a long time, but if he will not work safely, he will not work for us. I mentioned that old saying that safety is no accident, because safety is no accident. There's more to this saying than appears on first hearing. It's not an accident when businesses run year after year without lost work days, without deaths, even in dangerous, hazardous, inherently hazardous industries like agriculture. You can work safely. There was a question earlier about, we get angry when we say that agriculture is not safe. Agriculture can be done safely. Farming can be done safely. Statistically, it's hazardous, but we can operate safely. So, it's never a result of chance. It's always the result of planning, commitment from the top down, and empowerment of every single employee to not only give them permission to operate safely, but to require them and prioritize them to operate safely. It's a company culture that requires everyone to prioritize safely. It's not a program, it's not a project, it's not a book on the shelf. It's a culture within your company and within your family. One of the statistics was mentioned earlier that I loved was that you could even start to track accidents or accident rates by family. Some families get it, some family farms don't. The ones that don't need to get it. They won't be in business for many more generations if they don't. I recently heard a presenter that's talked about safety, that the president or owner had to give permission for everyone in the company to work safely. It was a really good presentation, but I take exception with that one word, permission. The owner or the manager has to demand a culture of safety from every employee, including him or herself. And the top manager, from the top all the way to the first day employee, has to be driven internally to do the job safely every time, and to expect everyone at every level of the company to do the same, because it's a team. Like a baseball team, the weakest link determines what happens with the company. If there's one person on the team that works unsafely, they put not only their own life at risk, they put the lives of everybody that works around them and the livelihoods of the operation and everybody working there at risk as well. It's unacceptable. It has to be seen as unacceptable for anyone to think safety is a joke or not serious or not important to them or anyone else. So history shows that companies who do this, who embody safety, who make it part of their DNA, part of their culture, yes, it costs them money, but history shows repeatedly that they are the long-term most profitable companies. Carl Casale talked a little bit about it yesterday. It was no surprise to me. I know where he came from. He came from the chemical industry, as I did early in my career. Safety, safety, safety. You're not profitable if you have incidents in the long run. So those who strive for excellence in everything they do, from the smallest to the most important job on the farm, in the long run, those are the companies, whether they're farm or non-farm businesses, those are the companies who excel. Whether it's being the very, very best small grower of radishes for the local farm market to being the largest and best and biggest dairy producer in the world. Those companies who embody safety and excellence, because safety is just part of an overall pursuit of excellence. Safety and goals like zero incidents. We know we probably never get to zero, but that's always the goal. That has to be the goal every day. No life is worth losing. No injury is worth budgeting for and saying it's acceptable. Zero is acceptable. We don't often make zero, but we drive for it. Those are the companies that become the most profitable companies in the world. I want you to think of some of the companies that are out there that are really big, really profitable. If you own stock in them, you're really happy with them. Think of ExxonMobil. I have a nephew who's an engineer with ExxonMobil. You can be fired in ExxonMobil for not working or traveling safely. You will, for sure, see your promotability reduced and your salary reduced if you or one of those who report to you or one of those who report to the person who reports to you has an accident that's deemed to be non-preventable. And believe me, there are very, very few non-preventable accidents. I remember hitting a deer once early in my career. I said, how could I not? It was 1 o'clock in the morning. I was driving home from the other state, and the deer ran in front of me. I hit it before I saw it. The answer was it was preventable because you could have slowed down 5 miles an hour, and you probably should have been in a hotel at 1 o'clock in the morning, not driving home from the other state. So it cost on bonus that year. ExxonMobil wasn't always that big and safety-minded. They had that little boat called the Exxon Valdez. They really focused even more on safety. And one of the things, if you remember the Gulf incident with another big oil company, my nephew goes to great pains to explain to me that with their systems, even had that accident happened, it wouldn't have been able to escalate like it did because of all the fail-safes, that their processes would have shut down much, much sooner, because safety is first, productivity is second, knowing that productivity will always be good when safety is always good. I know that Carl shared some similar stories from his board, with most of his board having at least one finger missing. I worked for a big company in the first 18 years of my career. They started out as a black powder manufacturing company around 1800. And black powder manufacturing, like agriculture, was inherently dangerous, even more inherently dangerous. And the model for a black powder factory in those days was that you put your powder factory along the river, and on the other side of the hill from the powder factory, you put your house and your office. So that if the factory exploded, which they always did from time to time in that era, your family and your office didn't blow up. Just the workers went across the river. The person who started the company I worked for in Wilmington, Delaware, built his factory on a different model. He said, this is not acceptable. We don't have to accept explosions and deaths and carnage as the norm. And he put his house in the middle along the river, and the factory between it and the river, in small boxes, so that only 5 or 6 people worked in each part of the factory, and the product moved from building to building as it became black powder. So that if there was an accident, the people, 5 or 6 in one building, would have a chance to escape around the thick walls, the thick rock walls, and survive, and the rest of the workforce wouldn't be threatened. That company, like most other big chemical companies, one of the first things you learn as an employee is safety. The presentation we just heard about onboarding employees, having an application process and a training process, I know that they start talking about safety and about how to protect yourself and the other people you're working with on day one. That's what you need to do with farming operations. It needs to start the minute a new person arrives on the farm, and it needs to go on every single day. During the day, when you see something unsafe, you need to call the person. The other employees need to call the person. how easy it is to hop off a tractor. Most of the time it's okay. But I know operations, big vegetable producer operations, where even the production workers, if the owner hops off a tractor, somebody points at him and says, hopped off, don't do that again. That's the kind of culture you want, where people call one another, they feel safe doing it, they make it almost fun because they know they're protecting one another and doing the right things. So big companies that are really profitable, they understand this. They not only allow safety, they demand it. Every one of our farms, if every one of our farms in agriculture would do this, we would have a different story to tell. We wouldn't be telling people that we are the third or fourth most dangerous industry in America. We wouldn't be facing the horrendous regulatory burdens that continue to be proposed on us because they wouldn't be seen as necessary. So safety just doesn't happen by accident. Safety is always the result of intentional planning. It's always the result of, it's never the result of just writing and adopting a plan and putting it on a shelf. It requires a relentless, everyday commitment to creating a culture of safe work in every single aspect of your operation. My association, NCAE, and many other organizations participate in a lot of state, regional, and national associations. One of the things I love to tell people is that I have lots of hats as the leader of my association. Department of Labor, immigration, but the piece that I'm most proud of is having been asked to be on the board of ASHCA and to be part of this organization, because this matters. Most of the other things we work on change from time to time, but safety and a culture of safety will save lives and change lives in your family, in your organization, and in the future of agriculture. And that's really important. You can find information on how to start a safety program. Start small, start big, but start. You can find some things on our website. You can find some things a lot of good things in the ASHCA website, your state universities, the insurance companies. There are lots of resources. You need to remember, and everybody in your operation needs to understand from day one and be reminded of it regularly, that America needs you. America needs your families. America needs your employees. And America and the world need the next generation of agricultural workers to grow the feed and food for the world, not populating somebody's accident statistics. We don't need you in those boxes at all. We need you producing the most abundant, the safest, the most affordable and diverse food that the world's ever known. That's what we need you to focus on. I started out saying that agriculture is considered one of the most dangerous occupations, and that is unacceptable. Unacceptable. And that is not sustainable either. Sustainable businesses don't suffer those kind of losses and allow it and don't act on it. It's also neither moral nor profitable. We have both legal, profit, and moral obligations to our farms, our families, our employees, and to our society. And only you and every other grower and every other agricultural organization and individual grower can change that. It's up to us to change it. It's not up to changing laws. That will or will not happen, but it's up to us to change the culture that allows this. More activists won't do the job, more laws won't do the job, more lawsuits will only kill more family farms, because family farms are killed every year by lawsuits because somebody didn't think about the right way to do things. Only American agriculture ourselves, by demanding an internal culture of safety, can do this job. When you go home, I hope every one of you will look at your own business, whether it's a farm or a ranch, big or small, whether it's a trade association or a university or an office or even your own home, and look at it differently. Put on the goggles of an outsider. In fact, I would often say, put on the goggles of a 12 or 14-year-old boy or girl and just imagine how much mischief could happen if you don't fix the pinch points and the places, the unsafe places, and just think about what you could do right away, that minute, to make it a little bit safer. And that's the way you need to think every hour of every day. What could I do to get this job done even better and more safely? It's continuous improvement. The goal is always needs to be 0 accidents, 0 lost time, 0 deaths on my farm, in my community, in my state in agriculture. 0 deaths in America is the goal for all of us. We try it every day, we don't often get there. And I do want to do one more slide. Oh, I thought I had another slide. It's okay. I had a slide that was just very conflicting.